Hi everyone! I hope you are doing well today. Today we're going to be talking about colonialism and imperialism and the difference between the two concepts. Before we begin the lesson, however, I'd like to talk about the image on the page and I want to address it. We see people from all across the country, German character, Russian character, British character, and they're all grabbing at certain territory and are essentially trying to gain more territory. This is a picture that truly defines both concepts and what they truly are. Grabbing or taking territory in order to expand your own empire. Colonialism and imperialism are both very similar concepts, but they have key differences, and that's really important to understand. The key difference between the two is that colonialism is the practice, things that you do, whereas imperialism is the idea or theory behind the practice. While there are other differences, this is a key difference that I want you all to remember. First, let's define imperialism. Imperialism is a policy of conquering and ruling other lands. A policy in which a strong nation seeks to dominate other countries, whether it's politically, socially, or economically. Many people applied Charles Darwin's theory of social Darwinism to justify imperialist expansion. While we'll talk about social Darwinism moving forward, it is the idea about evolution and survival of the fittest, which is applied to human society, stating that the strong will survive while the weak will fail. In all, imperialism was broken into two periods, old imperialism and the new imperialism. Old imperialism happened in the 1500s to the 1800s. Under old imperialism, European powers would build a series of trading stations in their attempt at accumulating wealth. They frequently cooperated with local rulers in India and locals in the European coastal trading centers. In essence, the old imperialism was about trade. They would cooperate with the natives that brought them goods, and they had trading spots along the coast of South Africa and islands by Asia and England. An example of old imperialism was the British East India Company. This private profit-seeking corporation was allowed by the British government to rule India by itself through company rule, in which the British government allowed it to act as representatives of the British and make laws as it saw fit in the area of India it controlled. Essentially, the British East India Company was able to monopolize trade in that particular part of the world. The British really wanted to control the Mediterranean Sea. They gained control after a decisive victory at the Battle of Plassey in 1757 and worked with compliant Indian leaders to get rich trading in India's cotton, silks, and indigo dye, salt, tea, and opium. So the new imperialism was a little bit different than the old imperialism. Between 1870 and 1914, the new imperialism favored direct conquest or formal empire. Instead of cooperating, they were at a stage of saying, we want to dominate. And they really had this drive for money. They went into countries and set up plantations, docks, and factories. And for a kind of like a day-to-day or today's world example, you had the old imperialism, which was almost like getting a partner, and the new imperialism, which was almost like having a boss. Japan, the US, and other industrialized nations of Europe became more aggressive in expanding into other lands. And they focused mainly on Asia and Africa. The scramble for Africa is an example of new imperialism. Many European countries rushed into Africa in an attempt to gain lands for themselves. In the 1870s, the Belgians began to trade with Africans in the Congo. Fearing they would miss out on various raw materials, the other European nations scrambled to establish their presence on the continent. Then we have colonialism. Let's first define colony. Colony is territory tied to a sovereign state. But then we have colonialism, which is a state when a state imposes political, economic, cultural systems on another territory. The policy or practice of acquiring full or partial political control over another country, occupying it with settlers and exploiting it economically. Imperialism can lead to colonialism, as it did when the 13 colonies were established. When we talk about colonial America and the 13 colonies, we are talking about the English colonies along the eastern seaboard. The 13 colonies were a group of British colonies on the east coast of North America, founded in the 17th and 18th century and declared their independence in 1776, which eventually formed, you got it, the United States. The 13 colonies, which you can see on this map, were New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. It was those colonies that came together to form the United States. Now, let's talk about the differences between imperialism and colonialism. Imperialism is the creation and the expansion of an empire, exercising power through sovereignty or direct rule, and really showing political and economical power over overseas territories. Whereas colonialism means to conquer overseas territory and rule over it, exploiting resources for the benefit of one's own country and the movement of people to these new territories, this assimilation that we see. Moving forward, we're really going to define imperialism and colonialism and talk about the motives, why people would want to create and expand their empire or conquer overseas territory. I look forward to seeing you all in the live class, and I hope you have a wonderful day.